In the Mignolaverse, Hellboy has battled a lot of strong antagonists who have given Hellboy a hell of a fight. From mythological creatures to creatures from hell, Hellboy has fought them all. But none of those enemies were as crazy as Herman Von Klempt. Herman was a Nazi scientist obsessed with creating different creatures using cybernetics. You know, when the words crazy scientist and Nazi come together, you're going to get a hell of a menace. Herman made his first appearance during Hellboy's first mission for the BPRD, and later throughout Hellboy's career, he appears again and again to create a new ruckus in his life. Although this scientist was just a head in a jar, he made Hellboy's life a living hell, and in today's video we will be diving deep into the origins of this menace. But before we get started in the video, we have a small request for you. If you like our content, subscribe to us and like this video. It might be a small click for you, but it means a lot to us. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get started. Backstory of Herman Von Klempt. Herman Von Klempt was a Nazi scientist born in the year 1885 in Frankfurt, Germany. Since childhood, Herman was obsessed with cybernetics, so much so that he once killed his family cat and tried to improve its design using parts of his family clock. The behavior of Herman deeply upset his family, and they started resenting him. They were scared of him and were glad when Herman left his house and went to medical school in Berlin. Once in Berlin, Herman became well known for his obsessive behavior and passion for cybernetics. This is where he met Karl Ruprecht Cronin and became very fond of him. Even though both of them shared similar ideas and interests, Herman considered Karl only as an invaluable resource that helped him financially and socially to conduct research that he might not have been able to conduct otherwise. In 1935, Herman along with Karl joined the Sonnenrad Society, where he used the organization's resources to work on this most popular project called the Craigaffey Project, where he created mentally and physically enhanced apes using cybernetics and used them as tools throughout his lifetime. In 1936, there was an explosion in the laboratory that Herman was working in, and he sustained life-threatening injuries where most of his body was destroyed except for his head. His life was eventually saved by Karl, who put Herman's head in a bell jar using a special liquid to keep him alive. In 1937, Gregory Rasputin asked several members of the Sonnenrad Society to help him out in Project Ragnarok, and Herman denied this offer because he considered Rasputin a fraud. Survival story of Von Klempt. In the Conqueror Worm storyline, we find out that Herman was the sole survivor of the Hunt Castle event. The story starts with a flashback to Hunt Castle in 1939. During this time, the Nazis were preparing to launch a rocket into space carrying Ernst Oeming. Ernst Oeming was a brilliant Nazi scientist, thus he was often called the Nazi Einstein. Due to the immense threat he posed, he was killed in a car accident by the Allied forces. But instead of giving tribute to their scientist, the Nazis decided to launch him into space. They did so because they were contacted by some unknown space entities who asked them to send a dead body for them to use as a host, and in return they'll help the Nazis in their war by obliterating their enemies. When the Nazis were just about to launch the rocket, they were ambushed by Lobster Johnson and his American troops. During the hassle caused by the arrival of Americans, the Germans couldn't open the top of the castle on time, and the launch of the rocket led to the destruction of the whole castle. Because of this, every American and German soldier died at the site, and the castle was considered haunted. 61 years later, Thomas Manning summons Hellboy and Roger and tells them about this event. He reveals that the Nazis launched the dead body of Ernst Oeming into space, and in 16 hours, this same spacecraft that was launched in 1939 is going to land in Hunt Castle. So he asks Hellboy to investigate this case and assigns Laura Karnstein, a local Austrian police officer, as their guide. When Hellboy and Roger reach the castle, they are attacked by a machine gun and Roger falls down a cliff. As Laura has already entered the castle, Hellboy enters the castle alone and finds himself face to face with a Craigaffey and is captured. When he wakes up, he witnesses Herman Von Klempt, who has somehow recovered his body and is standing as a normal human again. This is when he discovers that Laura is the granddaughter of Herman and has betrayed them. Herman then asks him if he remembers their brief encounter in Brazil and how he destroyed Brutus, and tells him about the Nazi space mission and how their plan was compromised because of Lobster Johnson and his team. The rocket was launched, but due to the complications caused during the launch, the castle came crashing down and all of the soldiers died at that event, leaving Herman as the only survivor of the Hunt Castle disaster. Von Klempt's plan to annihilate America, a sinister scheme. In 1946, after the Nazi army was defeated by the Von Klempt's plan to annihilate America, a sinister scheme. In 1946, after the Nazi army was defeated by the Allied forces, Herman retreated to a secret base and started working on the project Vampire Storm. This project was designed to destroy America by launching a rocket full of vampires upon the American subcontinent. The story begins with Trevor Brune, the adoptive human father of Hellboy. Brune travels to Berlin to investigate a mysterious case associated with the Nazis. Upon interrogating a Nazi general named Frederick, he realized a sinister plan created by the Nazis to bring chaos to the world. In 1944, Himmler proposed the Vampire Storm project to Hitler, and he approved it. The initial plan was to create a vampire army to aid the German soldiers, but when Hitler met the vampire leader Vladimir Gurescu, he felt overshadowed by his presence and realized that an army of such power could not be controlled and decided to execute Vladimir and his brides. But one of the brides, called Anna, was kept alive and was used to create vampire-human hybrids. However, the plan backfired and they ended up with deranged half-vampires that would kill anyone in their sight. 120 such half-vampires were created and frozen mid-transformation. Hitler planned to unleash them upon the world if Germany lost the war. When Germany lost the war in 1945, Hitler asked Frederick Manstein to unfreeze these subjects and unleash them upon the world, but Manstein couldn't do it because of his conscience and decided to seal the chamber containing the frozen half-vampire subjects. In 1946, the frozen subjects were moved from their chamber and taken somewhere else. And when Brune and his team reached the new location of the subjects, they found that Herman was responsible for all this chaos, and he launched two of his Kragaffis upon Brune and his team. While Brune's team fights the Kragaffis, he sneaks inside a circular chamber and discovers the frozen half-vampires. Herman captures Brune and tells him his sinister plan to turn America into a horror land, and he reveals that they are on board a rocket that will lead to the demolition of the American land. Brune escapes with the help of a sergeant, but the sergeant hands him a parachute and asks him to jump off the rocket. Brune was hesitant at first, but the sergeant pushed Brune off the rocket, and just a few minutes later, the rocket exploded, killing all the vampires inside it. Brune lands in France and assumes that Herman also died in a crash. Von Klempt's diabolical experiments in the heart of Brazil. In 1952, Hellboy was assigned his first assignment by Brune along with a few members from BPRD. They were sent to investigate a paranormal creature hunting a village in Brazil and killing its residents. Hellboy felt awkward in his first mission, but he soon got the hang of it and discovered that a creature haunting the village was a Kragaffi. Upon investigating this creature, Hellboy came face to face with Herman Von Klempt for the first time. Herman revealed that he was experimenting on dead bodies and trying to create a loyal army of mindless soldiers who would listen to all of his commands. But his plans are foiled by Hellboy and his team. Herman was about to be captured by one of Hellboy's teammates, but another Kragaffi got to Herman's head first and took him away. Hellboy meets Herman again in a mini-series titled Hellboy, the World's Greatest Paranormal Investigator. In 1959, Hellboy was given another mission in Brazil where a few peasant girls are being kidnapped, and when he investigates the mystery, he finds that Herman is behind this. He fights Herman and his favorite Kragaffi called Brutus. He destroys them both, and because of this, Herman holds a long-standing grudge against Hellboy. The resurrection of evil, the rediscovery of Von Klempt's legacy. In wake of the Devil's storyline, we again get a glimpse of Herman when his friend Carl is awakened from a suspended animation along with other members of Project Ragnarok. Upon waking up, Carl asks Roderick Zinko, the CEO of Zinko Corporation, to find and retrieve the head of Herman. When the head of Herman was brought to Carl, it seemed like he had died, but Carl revives him again because he believes that Herman is a genius and Rasputin failed to see his genius. He believed Herman could contribute greatly to their mission of reviving the vampire Vladimir Gurescu. But when Herman is revived, instead of helping Carl, he starts manipulating him into betraying Rasputin and asks him to join him and become the master of the world. Their conversation is overheard by Leopold Kurtz, a loyal follower of Rasputin, and he goes crazy and starts attacking Herman with a wrench. When attacked, Herman asks his friend to save him. Carl intervenes and explains that they are only having a conversation, but Kurtz wants only one thing: to destroy the one who tried to betray his master. With no option left, Carl had to stab Kurtz to save the life of his friend. Rasputin suddenly appears before them and scolds them for bringing Herman to his church. Carl blames Zinko for bringing Herman here, and Rasputin turns Zinko blind. Deranged from the sudden blindness, Zinko runs here and there and accidentally presses a button that blows up the whole church. Fate of Herman Von Klempt. We get to witness the fate of Herman during the Conqueror Worm storyline. We have already talked about how Herman captured Hellboy after he went to investigate the supposed return of the spaceship carrying Ernst Obing. After capturing Hellboy and telling his survival story, Herman leaves the site with his granddaughter and prepares for the spaceship's arrival on Earth. When the space shuttle onboard Obing lands on Earth, it releases a toxic fume and turns every human in the surroundings into frogmen, and a giant worm-like creature comes out of it and starts devouring these frogmen. This is when Roger arrives at the site with a ghost of Lobster Johnson, and Lobster asks Roger to defeat this creature because he is the only living being who can do so. Roger is confused but still tries to fight it and is soon aided by Hellboy. On the other side, Herman meets his granddaughter and tells her the sinister plan of the Conqueror Worm. When Herman created his Kragafia number 10, he didn't have any purpose in his life, but one day, a divine being told him the reality of the Hunt Castle space mission. The divine being told him that the unknown space entity that contacted the Nazis had already taken over Ernst Obing's body and transformed itself into a creature called the Conqueror Worm, but it couldn't return to Earth until it was called back. Since all the Nazis died in a Hunt Castle disaster, it was Herman who was tasked with the divine purpose of bringing the space shuttle down to Earth. Upon arrival, the Conqueror Worm would kill all living beings and release the 369 Ogdru-M upon Earth. And then the Ogdru-Jahad would appear and push the world to its end. This prophecy gave Herman a new purpose to his life, and he set off the plan and called back the space shuttle, which eventually released the Conqueror Worm. On the other hand, Hellboy and Roger discovered a secret to defeating the Conqueror Worm. They found out that the worm hates electricity, and since Roger is a being of electricity, he can trap this creature inside him. After Roger traps the creature, he soon discovered that he is unable to control this creature and asks Hellboy to destroy him. Hellboy doesn't comply and asks Roger to try to control this worm until they return to the Bureau. Just about then, the head of Herman appears and starts mocking them. In a final attempt to defeat this menace, Roger holds the head and jumps off a cliff. This destroys the head, and Herman Von Klempt finally meets his demise at the hands of Roger. But later, during the Devil You Know storyline, it was revealed that Herman was revived once again. But his terrain didn't last long because he was finally killed by Rasputin when he returned to Earth after becoming the vessel of Ogdru-Jahad. Other media appearance of Herman Von Klempt. Other than comics, Herman Von Klempt has appeared as the main antagonist in a video game titled Hellboy: The Science of Evil, which was released in 2008 for the PlayStation 3 after the success of the Hellboy movie in 2004. The story follows Hellboy, who is sent to Romania to fight off a crazy witch who is terrorizing their land. Herman makes his first appearance in a flashback where it is revealed that a creature called Oni is terrorizing a rural area in Japan because the Nazis stole a sacred artifact. Hellboy soon finds out that Herman was behind all of this, and he stole this artifact for his crazy experiments. He soon finds Herman but is attacked by one of his Kragafis. During the fight, a log thrown by Kragafi hits Herman and he falls down a cliff. Hellboy then returns the artifacts to an old monk and the Ani goes back to rest. During present times, Hellboy accidentally washes off against the castle and tries to contact his friends with the help of a radio, but Herman catches the radio signal and he is alerted of Hellboy's presence. Hellboy enters the castle to find a sinister plan that Herman is plotting this time and is informed by the spirit of a dead soldier that the Nazis used this castle to conduct their unholy experiments, and Herman has returned to carry on another of his crazy experiment. After defeating all of his minions, Hellboy finally reaches Herman, and Herman launches a mutated cyborg upon him. During their fight, the laboratory catches fire and it is revealed that Herman's body is a robot and he is in fact still a head in a jar. Hellboy then used Herman's hovering head and pushed it down the power core of the mutated cyborg, leading to an explosion that blasted off Hellboy into the ocean and seemingly killed Herman for good this time. Marvelous verdict. Herman Von Klempt is considered a massive threat in the Hellboy universe, not because of his crazy experiments, but because he never seems to die. Every time he dies, he somehow returns again and again. But with all his friends dead and Herman having no real motivation to create chaos, it would be difficult to revive him again and set him off into an evil plan. But nothing can be said for sure because Mike Mignola can use him as a trump card and make him return whenever he pleases. With that being said, if you liked our content, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.